Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasant day to our partners from the government of Japan, as well as to our partners and colleagues from the Philippine government. So welcome to this public-private sector dialogue, which is part of the capacity building activities on measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV process under the project on the Partnership to Strengthen Partnership and Co-Innovation, or PaSTI, supported by the Ministry of Environment, Japan, in collaboration with the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, or OECC, also in Japan. So to formally open our event is the Chief of the Climate Change Information and Technical Support Division of the Climate Change Service under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. May I please call on Mr. Albert A. Magalang. Sir Albert.
Thanks so much, Gigi-san, and a pleasant morning to all of us, especially to our esteemed partners from the Ministry of Environment of Japan, as well as our colleagues, longtime friends from the Overseas Environment Cooperation Center of Japan. So good morning once again. And also I would like to greet our partners from the private and industry sector, our friends from the Climate Change Commission and other agencies who are present today, and also colleagues from the Environmental Management Bureau, our former office, and also the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant and safe day to all of us. Just to remind everybody that the pandemic is not over. It's not over yet. Anyway, so the Philippines is indeed pleased and honored to have been involved as one of the country partners in the implementation of PaSTI. PaSTI stands for the Partnership to Strengthen Transparency for Innovation, the Enhanced Transparency Framework for Action and Support under the historic Paris Agreement, which was adopted in December 2015, has established universal, flexible, and harmonized measurement, reporting, and verification provisions for climate mitigation as well as adaptation. And also, we would also like to emphasize that the transparency is not limited to the emissions reductions, to actions, but also to the support given to us always by our partners, including our partners from the ministry, from the government of Japan. So, under this framework, there is this common system of transparency that should be applied to all countries. So this MRV system is central to achieve countries' nationally determined contributions, adaptation actions as well. That would also include good practices, priorities, needs, and gaps that will be reported at the global stack take. That will happen every 5 years. So it is an opportunity for countries to be transparent in their actions, because we really have to work on common standards, common measurement. In fact, we're also doing that in UNEA, UN Environment Assembly, now that we have the new agreement on that's for plastic pollution. Anyway, through the support of the PaSTI project, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, in collaboration with the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center and the Ministry of Environment of Japan, is currently developing the measurement, reporting, and verification system for the NDC, especially on mitigation measures to start with. So particularly for the waste and industrial processes and product use sectors. These sectors are being handled by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources as part of our contribution to the overall NDC or national NDC or nationally determined contribution of the Philippines. So it is expected that with an effective MRV system in place, and capacities built among stakeholders, major players, especially our partners from the private sector, there would be significant improvement in the existing reporting and monitoring system in these sectors. Thus, the support being provided for the building of transparency related capacity of the country would provide a clear understanding of climate actions, as well as clarity and tracking of progress towards achieving the country NDCs. In a way, there is this there's science. There's science in measurement, which we all know that, and we all know that everything should be science. Should be based on science. Even our policy, emerging policies, should be science based. So, other than the tools, the processes that are being taken up in this project, capacity building on MRV is also very important. So henceforth, the earlier conduct of the 4 workshops on MRV highlighted the technical and policies aspects in setting up systems for MRV or for the transparency framework, and also facilitating cooperation between the government and the business sector. So further, we will envision that these shall serve as crucial steps to strengthen data and information and mitigation policies and measures, or the PAMs, including the results. So such data and information shall allow us to gauge how far we are in terms of our path towards sustainable development, and inform the development of relevant policies and capacity building measures. So further, this also would support the development of investment projects, because these are based on real numbers, which were also used in projecting the emissions that will be avoided, or that will be reduced. And of course, there also which will be the basis for the investment projects. In fact, as we have said several times, the nationally determined contributions, the policies and measures under this, the NDC, should always be transformed, should be transformed into business models based on science. Okay, and one thing more which I would like to also emphasize is that sometimes we were also engrossed in in talking about markets. We also have to remember that under Article 6 there are also non-market mechanisms. This has also been agreed by countries to the parties to the UNFCCC, and there are also some concepts or mechanisms that would support mitigations, like support from the green banking and sustainable financing initiatives. So colleagues, together we will now chart our path towards creating a shared strategy. Take note, shared. Everything should be shared if possible, because it would be lighter for countries, especially for developing countries like the Philippines, in achieving sustainable development, or the MRV, in the future. So in closing, we also be able to take on the relevant lessons and useful experience from this, the insights or the experience that we acquired as we have this partnership for several years now. So with the continuous collaboration between the government and the private sector, we are optimistic that we can significantly contribute to the goals of the Paris Agreement as we tread the path towards securing a just and sustainable future. Thank you so much. Mabuhay, and good morning once again to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Albert. And now we are likewise pleased and honored to have with us the Deputy Director for International Strategy on Climate Change, Global Environment Bureau of the Ministry of Environment, Japan, to welcome us all. So may I respectfully call on Mr. Naomi Inoue. Please take the floor.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Albert Magalang and partners of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and experts of both countries, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Japan. I'm very sorry that my boss, the director, Mizutani, cannot attend the meeting in order to go for another urgent matter. But I'm very happy to be here and then be present at this workshop, which is the very last important event of the series of PaSTI workshops this year, happening in this fiscal year. And I'm very happy to see Mr. Magalang online again after the policy dialogue on Tuesday. So very nice to see you. On behalf of the Ministry of the Environment, Japan, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this public-private sector dialogue, which is a part of a workshop series that have programmed together with DNR. As another component of the partnership to strengthen PaSTI. So my satisfaction is even greater since this dialogue is organized as one of the important events under the Philippines-Japan Environmental Week, which is a flagship event in this area of environmental cooperation between the Philippines and Japan. I believe this is a clear sign of the importance we are assigning to the issue of transparency, not only for both countries, but also for international community, as mentioned by Mr. Magalang. Transparency is one of the very important topics, especially in to secure the steadfast achievement of the Paris Agreement. And then, in fact, at the COP26 held last year in Glasgow, parties have agreed to pursue efforts to limit 1.5-degree goal. And then it was very epoch-making event to see that all the countries have agreed the importance of 1.5, and then 1.5 was at the center of the attention. We all agreed upon highlighting the importance of 1.5 degree. But in order to achieve that goal, of course, the key word is a transparency, I believe. So that makes this the significance of this workshop event. For those who didn't have the opportunity to join us in the previous workshop, let me just briefly introduce what PaSTI is. The PaSTI initiative has started in 2019, aiming at conducting capacity building activities for stakeholders and to develop incentive mechanisms to facilitate private sector engagement. So in January, we have organized a workshop titled MRV 201, How to Measure Facility Level GHG Emissions. And I believe it was very active. We saw active discussion and then exchange information. I was very happy to be at that event as well. And today's event, together with the sector-specific key informant interviews that we are conducting in parallel, completes the series of events that we have programmed for the current fiscal year. Therefore, today we are going to have a session dedicated to talk about preparations of a pilot projects that we are planning to conduct later this year, which will serve to determine the steps that private sector representative of specific sectors need to take into account for an effective MRV process. And also as an example of lessons that we can learn from those experiences. This session will be followed by the public-private sector dialogue, where we are aiming at getting inputs from representatives of the cement, refrigeration, and air conditioning, and also wastewater treatment sectors, and also to promote a dialogue with the public sector to determine needs and gaps in order to improve the MRV system, which will be most suitable to the conditions of the country. So the one of the characteristics of this workshop is that we focus on the very important key sectors for the Philippines. And then we try to deepen our understanding in those sectors at first. And we hopefully expand those sectors and then try to expand the coverage of the transparency, hopefully. I really hope that this dialogue will serve to provide some important elements that we will need in order to finish designing sector-specific MRV systems, and as initially planned by the PaSTI initiative, and at the same time to get clear ideas of what we need to do in the next phase of this project. Okay, so I think I'm gonna finish here. Last but not least, let me extend my deepest appreciation to the dedication of the partners in DNR of the Philippines, and my colleague of OECC, one of the most important partners of environmental cooperation of Japanese government, in moving forward this project of PaSTI. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sir Naomi. And we also are very grateful for that very encouraging message to be able to further strengthen our partnership with the government of Japan. So at this point, to orient us on the objectives of the dialogue and to introduce the participants of this event, may I kindly call on Mr. Riki Nakajima, who is currently the researcher from the Project Development Department of the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, or OECC. Sir Riki-san, please take the floor.
Thank you, Ma'am Gigi. So good morning, everyone. My name is Riki Nakajima, as introduced. And Mel-san, yes, thank you very much sharing the screen. So I would like to describe today's objectives. And today's seminar is titled PaSTI Public-Private Sector Dialogue 2022. Next slide, please. This objective of this workshop is to facilitate the communication between public and private sectors and incorporate ideas from the private sector for the development of a pilot project and potential incentive mechanism, which shall be implemented in 2022 as part of the PaSTI initiative. Why this kind of dialogue is important? This public-private sector dialogue is important because in spite of efforts taken by the public and private sector in relation to measurement of GHG emissions and its corresponding, it is well known that there are gaps in the communication. So to streamline the actions of the public and private sectors, dialogue, communication among both sectors must be facilitated. This dialogue intends to provide a space where opinions and experience from both the public and private sectors can be shared, aiming at getting some conclusions that can further improve measurement and reporting efforts, which ultimately can contribute to consolidate the country's MRV system. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Naomi explained us, the PaSTI aims to deliver three key outputs. First one is promoting the engagement of non-state actors. Second one is enhancing the capacity and institutional structure in each country under their national development strategy. And third one is strengthening and streamlining the transparency action at subnational, national, and regional level. To deliver these three key outputs, it is very important that both the private and public sector communication are facilitated well. So this is short overview of today's objectives. Next slide, please. And please let me introduce our participants today. As guest speakers, we have Ms. Melissa Cardenas from MRV and Mr. Roland Abad Jr. From DNR, who will presenting us in the next session. And as private public sector dialogue, we invited four panelists from private sector. Ms. Gretchen Fontajon Enare from Pollution Control Association of Philippines, PaSTI-PH. Engineer Jeffrey Mijares from the Chemical Industries Association of the Philippines, SPIK. Engineer Cesar Luis Lim from the Philippine Society of Ventilating, Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Engineers, PSVARE. And Engineer Voltaire Acosta from US Habitat. At this moment, I would like to ask every participant, every panelist and every guest speakers to turn their camera on so that we can have a short group shots together. So please, everybody turn your camera on. And I think, Melton, it is good if you can close the presentation. All right, so everybody, please turn your camera on. So Jeffrey, can you turn your camera? And Sir Cesar, are you there? Yes. So this is today's participant. So in 3, please smile. 1, 2, 3. And one more time. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Miss Gigi, microphone back to you.
Thank you very much, Ricky-san. So we shall now proceed to the next session, which shall focus on our plan for the pilot project for this year, 2022. And the intent of the pilot project is for us to be able to demonstrate the operationalization or implementation of an effective MRV process system as a result of the series of capacity building activities on MRV that we have been conducting earlier. So to share with us first on the data needs or data requirements for the greenhouse gas or GHG inventory 2020 is our colleague from the DNR Climate Change Service. Friends and colleagues, please welcome Mr. Rolando J. Abad Jr. Jay, please take the floor.
Thank you, Tita Gigi, and good morning, everyone. I'll just share my screen right now. Okay, so good morning. My name is Rolando Abad Jr. and I'm from the Climate Change Service of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So for this, I will be sharing the greenhouse gas inventory requirements for the IPPU and the waste sector. So particularly for the 2015 and 2020 greenhouse gas inventory. So allow us to take this opportunity to announce to the private sector in attendance to this event that we'll be requesting data through our EMB regional offices in order to develop the inventory. So my presentation would cover the institutionalization of the Philippine Greenhouse Gas Inventory System, and then the IPPU and waste sector categories, which is based on the 2006 IPCC guidelines. And then I'm also going to briefly share the results and experience in conducting the 2010 greenhouse gas inventory in 2018, and then the data collection for the 2015 and the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory. So there will also be matrices or matrix that we will also run through just to give you some ideas or background on what would be the data that we'll be needing. So first off, in 2014, this is the issuance of the Executive Order number 174 So this is the institutionalized, the Philippine Greenhouse Gas Inventory Management and Reporting System. So under the system, the Climate Change Commission, or the CCC, is the overall lead for this. And then there are 4 agencies or departments that have been identified as the lead agency. So for the DNR, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we have been tasked to conduct, monitor the greenhouse gas inventory, particularly for the waste, IPPU, and the forest and other land use sector. So for the PaSTI project, we emphasize the importance and the need for the waste and IPPU sector in terms of improving our data collection and our MRV system. So we understand that this process, this greenhouse gas inventory process, requires the whole of society approach. So we'd be needing information and even data from different sectors, from private sector, from other government agencies, from the academe, and from the local government units as well. So for the Philippine experience, we have developed 2 national greenhouse gas inventory, which we have submitted to the UNFCCC. So these are the first national communication and the second national communication. And under this system, the EO 174, we have also conducted a greenhouse gas inventory exercise with a 2010 base year. So we have completed this one. And then the next greenhouse gas inventory cycles that we'd be developing is for the 2015 and 2020. So I hope that we could get the participation and cooperation from the key stakeholders, from data providers, in order to develop a more accurate greenhouse gas inventory. So just briefly sharing to you what are the sectors, what are the categories or industries within the sector. So for the IPPU sector, there are several industries, particularly mineral, chemicals. So we're glad that SPEAK is here, metal industry, non-energy use, electronics industry, ODS substitutes, which is PaSTI could also help us, other product manufacture and use, and also other. So this seems to be a very, very various industry. So we really need the participation, the cooperation of the data providers from these key industries. And also for the waste sector, the waste sector is divided into 2 subsectors, which is solid waste and wastewater. So most of the data will be coming from the local government units and also from private sector for industrial wastewater, industrial solid waste. So just to show you the result of the 2010 National Greenhouse Gas Inventory, which is part of the PGHGI MRS exercise that we made as coordinated by the Climate Change Commission. So you can see that IPPU is industry sector. The IPPU sector in yellow is one of the least contributor in the sectors for greenhouse gas emissions, and also the waste sector in green. Now, but we also noted that there are many gaps in terms of data collected, the accuracy of the data, the completeness of the data. So we hope that in the next greenhouse gas inventory cycles, particularly for the 2015 and 2020, we would see an improvement on our greenhouse gas inventory calculation. So these are just some of the experience that we have in doing the 2010 inventory. So the challenges, particularly on the data, is that we were able to gather data, but it's not complete, especially to be used in the 2006 IPCC guidelines. Now, so for example, in the glass sector, we were not able to get all the glass manufacturers' data. And also some data are not fully suited to the needs of the greenhouse gas inventory. If you look, for example, the waste sector, the solid waste subsector, so our classification for the disposal facilities, like we have open dam site, closed dam site, and sanitary landfills. But in the 2006 IPCC guidelines, it's different. It's unmanaged shallow, unmanaged deep, and sort of like that. So we have to make several assumptions, and experts' judgment on how do we harmonize the terms, what is available in the country and what is prescribed by the IPCC guidelines. And then we also have problem mainstreaming the function of greenhouse gas inventory within the offices. So we have made we have established a greenhouse gas inventory team in EMB, but yeah, it's not fully mainstreamed. No? There's always the need to train new members and retool the members, or there will be changes also of the members of the greenhouse gas inventory team. So this is part of the improvement that we are looking at moving on in the institutional structure. In terms of activity data and emission factors, so for the IPPU and waste sector, we really don't have country-specific emission factors. No? So we're just using default values provided by the IPCC. So most of our calculations are tier 1, no? The basic methodology, but except for some like cement, we're able to calculate using tier 2. Lack of data for industrial processes and the industrial wastewater. So particularly industrial wastewater, this is one of the improvement that we are aspiring in this coming next greenhouse gas inventory cycles, 2015 and 2020. And then the use of assumptions and experts' judgment, particularly in the waste sector, in the solid waste sector. So we really don't have data in terms of how many waste are composted, how many waste are open-borne. So we have to make some assumptions in order to get the data. And next, the data collection and consolidation for the 2015 and 2020 greenhouse gas inventory. So we have conducted a training. This is organized by the Climate Change Commission in January 27 to 21. This is for the IPPU sector. And then for 25 and 28, this is for the waste sector. So we have actually invited the key stakeholders, not only in the DNR, but also in other agencies and the private sector as well. And we have also come up with a memorandum that dated February 16, 2022 to kickstart or kick off the data collection activity. So just recently, we have already provided our regional offices of the memorandum, as well as the data collection matrices that have been developed in collaboration with the Climate Change Commission. So right now, I'll just be showing or we'll have a run through of the data collection matrix. So first, I will show you the IPPU data collection matrix. Yep. So if you can see the Excel file, so this is developed in collaboration with the Climate Change Commission. So we were able to have this data collection matrix, particularly for the IPPU sector. So there's a color coding, there's an instruction guide, general
we
information.
Cannot see the matrix.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm very sorry for that. Yeah. Yes, so this is the data collection matrix for the IPPU sector. So this was developed in collaboration with the Climate Change Commission. So it is actually a very comprehensive data collection matrix. It already contains an instruction guide and all the categories under the IPPU as are provided in the Excel matrix. So it's color coded as well. You can see that there are different colors for different industries. For the mineral industry, we covered cement, lime, glass, ceramics, and other. So I'll just gonna briefly run through each industry. So for cement, we also provided here what are the requirements for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So we're not actually looking at right now getting tier 3 data, but we're aspiring to get tier 2, at least the intermediate methodology for calculating greenhouse gas emissions. So for tier 2, you can see that the data that we need is clinker production for cement, So, and then we also need a percent of clinker of cement. So for example, yeah. And then we also need data for the correction factor for cement kiln dust. So that would include the weight of cement kiln dust not recycled to the kiln, the weight of clinker produced, the fraction of original carbonate in the cement kiln dust, the fraction calcination of the original carbonate in the cement kiln dust. So this is for cement. For lime production, for tier 2, we would need data for the tons of lime produced, the lime kiln dust production as well, and then the correction factor for the lime kiln dust. And then for glass production, so actually glass and cement is also part of the NDC. So what we need is the amount of production per type of glass. No? So there are drop downs here per the type of glass. So you can see float, container, fiberglass, specialty, and so on. And then we also need the data for the glass cullet ratio. So how much percentage they're using cullet or recycled glass in producing glass. Yes. And then for other industries, ceramics production. So we need a production data for the ceramics. And then for tier 2, we would need the carbonates consumed, no? Whether calcite or dolomite. So we also have data matrix for other use of soda ash. So yeah, for other use of soda ash, there's also a drop down, or yeah, if there's also a drop down for if this industry is occurring, so yes, no, or to follow, and so on. And then for magnesia, so what we need is the mass of carbonates consumed, and then the fraction of calcination achieved, and then the type of magnesia. So the type of magnesia also, there's also a drop down list here. And then for the chemicals, so these are the chemicals that are included in the 2006 IPCC guidelines. So ammonia, nitric acid, adipic acid, caprolactam, glyoxal, and glyosolic acid, carbide, titanium dioxide, soda ash, as well as petrochemicals, methanol, ethylene, and ethylene dichloride, as well as vinyl dichloride. So we are glad that SPIK is here in order to verify and provide us data information later on the production of these chemicals. But I understand that based on our previous consultations with them, these chemicals are not produced in the country. So we also need to revalidate and verify if there are already manufacturing industries for these chemicals. So basically for the chemical industry, the data that we need would be the production. Like for ammonia, we would need the ammonia production in tons, and then also the amount of urea produced from producing ammonia. So for tier 2, then we would need, aside from the production, we would need the type of process, production process. So what technology are used, or the process or the raw material is being utilized. So this is also part of the drop down. Yeah, so I'll not go one by one on the chemicals, but yeah, for the next industry, the metal industry, we also have iron and steel industry. So the data that we need is the amount of crude steel produced, and then also the type of furnace or steel making method. So for the type of furnace and steel making method, it's already also included in the drop down. So whether it's using basic oxygen furnace, electric arc furnace, or open heart furnace. And then yep. So I'll not go through each tab one by one. We also have lubricant use, paraffin wax use, solvent use. And for the semiconductor electronics industry, what we need is actually the type of fluorinated gases that we are using. This is for etching, cleaning of industrial or electronic parts. So it's also in the drop down, the type of chlorinated gases, and what we need is the amount of gas that they are using, as well as the fraction of the annual plant capacity. So for the ODS substitutes, also depleting substances substitutes, we have refrigeration and air conditioning. So actually we're hoping to get or to gather data for tier 2, because this is part also of our NDC. So in order to verify the the implementation or the reductions, no, that's happening from the measure, you would need the annual sales of new refrigerants. So this is per sub application. So different sub application like window air conditioning, unitary air conditioning, commercial or industrial air conditioning, domestic refrigeration, mobile refrigeration, and so on. So there are different sub applications for refrigeration and air conditioning, and we would need to have information on the sales of this, no, of this data of this equipment. And also that's also the same for foam blowing agents, fire protection, aerosols, and so on. And then for other and the IPPU sector, it's actually the electrical equipment. So it's based on the type of equipment. So whether it's pressure, close pressure, or so on. So this, I think, the transformers. So we'd also be trying to complete the data sets for the IPPU sector. Yeah. So we also have need to get data from pulp and paper. So for the pulp and paper, what we need is the annual production, and also the production type, whether it's kraft pulping process, acid sulfide process, or others. Yeah, so this is for the IPPU sector. Now I'll be going also very briefly for the solid waste and the wastewater sector. So yeah, so I hope you have seen my screen for the solid waste. Okay. So for the solid waste, actually, we're using the 2006 recommended model, the first order decay method. So we'll be backtracking 50 years back. No? So if we're going to do an inventory of 2015, then we need to get as far back as 1965 data. So we have here, and what we need is population. I think it's given from the Philippine Statistics Authority, but we also need to get information of per capita waste generation. So there are already also aggregation made by the solid waste division. But what we also need from the local government unit is that how do they manage their waste? No? How much percent of this waste are sent or delivered to different type of solid waste disposal facilities? So we need to categorize our disposal facilities in terms of the IPCC categories, the unmanaged shallow, unmanaged deep, managed shallow, managed deep, and categorized. So we, aside from the volume of waste, we also need to get information on the depth of the waste disposal sites in order for us to properly identify which of the disposal sites should we use. And we also need data in terms of the composition of the waste that are sent to the disposal facilities. So in the IPCC guidelines, we need to disaggregate waste per type. So like kitchen waste, garden waste, agricultural waste, livestock waste, paper, plastics, and so on. So we would need the waste analysis and characterization of the waste per region, so that we can be able to develop a national waste composition. So aside from the waste sent to disposal facilities, for the biological treatment, for the Philippines, we have composting and anaerobic digestion. So for this, we would need the information and the amount of waste composted or digested, and then the fractions of waste composted. And for incineration, I think there's no incineration facility yet in the Philippines, but if there is, we would need also the amount of waste incinerated per type of waste. And then for open burning, we could do it by province. We need information on the population, and then the percentage of population practicing open burning. I know it's very difficult to get data, so there would need to be an assumptions in order to generate this data, but we would also base these assumptions from inputs from our partners from local government units. So now I will also share the wastewater. Okay. So this is for the wastewater data collection matrix. So the wastewater is divided into domestic and industrial wastewater. So what we need first is the population per region, and then the disaggregation between urban and rural population. So for both for 2015 and 2020, and then other data would be the cities covered by the wastewater treatment facility or the water concessionaire, because we are focusing our data collection for those LGUs that have facilities, wastewater treatment facilities. So what we need is the population that was served by that facility, the wastewater treatment facility, population served, the wastewater treated in terms of cubic meters per year, the total organic loading in the wastewater. So what is the volume of BOD per year? And then also estimate of the per capita BOD per year. And then we also need information on the sludge removal, how many kilograms of BOD is being removed from the treatment. So for this, we also need data on the influent BOD and the effluent BOD, as well as the amount of methane recovered and flared. So this is for the domestic wastewater. And then for the industrial wastewater, so this is based on the industries that are prescribed by the 2006 IPCC guidelines. So there is a drop down. So this consists of 16 industries, from alcohol refining, beer and malt, coffee, dairy product, and so on. So the regional offices can just select what industry is existing in the regions, and then fill up the information, the name of the establishment, the location, the details, and information regarding data uncertainty. So based on the 2006 IPCC guidelines, these are the data needs for the industrial wastewater. So first off is the industrial production, the tons product produced for that industry, the process wastewater generation. So this is in terms of cubic meters per ton of product, and then the influent chemical oxygen demand, as well as the wastewater treatment technology use. So we have also put in drop down what are the treatment technology provided in the IPCC. So I understand that some industries have multiple treatments. So we put here three fields for them to fill up. And if it's not part of the drop down, then they would need to specify what treatment they're using. And another information that we need for industrial wastewater is the sludge removal and the methane recovery. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation. So I just provided the details for the greenhouse gas inventory needs for us in developing the 2015 and 2020 greenhouse gas inventory, as well as this data would also be used in monitor, measurement, and reporting and verification of the NDC measures, some of the NDC measures. So it's very important for us to have a good to partner with data providers. So that's why we are announcing in this forum what the data that we need. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sir Jay. And indeed, that was a very comprehensive presentation, which we hope our partners from the private sector or the industry sector have been able to take note of. So we really need a great deal of data from them. So another aspect for the determination of the pilot project is the conduct of the key informant interviews, primarily among specific industry sectors. And the purpose of these consultations is to be able to get their responses in terms of their training needs, as well as their challenges in the preparation of their respective greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So to present to us the results and findings from these sectoral consultations is our partner from the EnvironWeave Integrative Environmental Research. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Melissa May Cardenas. Ms. Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ma'am Gigi. Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Ohayou gozaimasu, minasan. Okay, I will be sharing some insights from the sectoral consultations we did on greenhouse gas inventories and measurement, reporting, and verification system. Okay, this is generally my outline, my presentation outline. Firstly, I'd like to look at policy and reporting environment. We'll also share the insights that we have gathered and some insights on designing a dashboard and a data ecosystem for environmental data. Just to give an overview for those who are not yet familiar with the environmental policy and reporting system, we have, for a facility, we should have several items that they have to report to. For instance, they would have to report emissions, effluents, solid waste, as well as hazardous waste that they generate, the sludge and infectious waste that they generate. And this is usually provided in self-monitoring reports or reported in self-monitoring reports under the EIS system of the Philippines. But aside from that, also there are other policies that are asking us to report and monitor land use, municipal solid waste, clean energy, even marine litter, disaster response, as well as, of course, climate change. And these are coming from national or local plans, as well as facility level reports. But zooming out of that ecosystem of facility to local and national reporting, we also have some systems wherein globally, we monitor and report ozone depleting substances, fluorocarbons, mercury under the Minamato Convention, hazardous waste, POPs. Recently, or yesterday, there was a decision from UNEP about plastic pollution developing a binding agreement to control plastic pollution. And of course, marine litter will probably follow suit. And for today, we of course are discussing greenhouse gas emissions. So this is also part of a global monitoring effort. So from the facility level to the local, city, municipality, to the national, and to the global efforts, we also have to consider each step of the process. So may I share some of the insights that we have gathered through our private sector key informant interviews and surveys. We did this in two ways. We also had almost one-on-one sectoral key informant interviews. Some of the sectors that we were able to interview or consult with are coming from the chemical industries associations, pollution control industry associations, the refrigeration and appliance sector as well. And then we also had a key informant interview with wastewater. And then we also did a quick online survey. We distributed this to our past participants from our MRV dialogue and workshop last January. In a short time, we were able to gather about 10 respondents. It's a bit of a long survey, but basically it mimics the discussion points from the sectoral key informant interviews. And from this survey, some respondents were from the food and beverage sector, the commercial establishment sector, government, private and consultancy groups, The cement industry, of course, was a very good participant, and even Commerce, now Philippine Chamber of Commerce, was also a respondent. So what were the discussion points during our key informant interviews that we also asked in our online survey? One was about obligations. One of the questions was, do you know of any reports for submitting greenhouse gas emissions inventory to government agencies? Another question was about voluntary measurement, or are there any ongoing voluntary GHG measurement activities in your facility or organization? And then we also talked about the challenges that they experience in data collection for greenhouse gas emissions, as well as increasing engagement from the private sector, as well as what are your expectations from government, from private sector to government. So in a way, some of these questions focused on what you call, the stick or the push regulatory aspect of it. And some of these questions focused on, the pull or the voluntary aspect of it. And of course, data collection bridges both push and pull. So sharing some of the responses on voluntary measurement. So it ranges from, the questions range from no, because we are not required at this time. However, we do report to the city or to DNR about our performance indicators and emissions of concern if it's covered by law. So there was a range of answers from not really, or no, not really, to yes. And in fact, there were some answers that were related to their efforts as part of CDM or JCM. Or for instance, they would also say that indirectly we report it because it's part of facility energy consumption as part of the SMRs, but not everybody converts that into equivalent GHG reduction. So it depends on the company's key performance indicators. So it also depends on how much the company looks at or values greenhouse gas emission inventory, if it's part of their overall mission. One respondent even said that, yes, in Jesuit schools across Southeast Asia, we are required to monitor it because it's part of our school long-term goal or roadmap for low carbon emissions. So another question was about the obligation to report. The responses range from, of course, no, we're not yet obliged to. But of course, there's a new regulation from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Memorandum Circular number 4 in 2019. They released a memorandum wherein all publicly listed companies are required to report sustainability data. Some of these companies that we talked to said that, yes, we do, but when we delisted from it, we don't report anymore. So it also depends on whether or not they're a publicly listed company. So some of them were saying, right now we don't, but if there's a policy, we will comply to it, of course. And then another question about data collection ranges from, challenges in methodology to management of the data and to analyzing the data. Some of them frankly said, if we knew how, we would measure it. Some of them also voiced their challenges in very specific aspects of GHG emissions. Like, for instance, the transport part of scope 3, they are having a hard time consolidating this data. There was also some confusion shared about different methodologies that they have encountered. And now, because of these, they'd like to have a more general or standardized framework, which methodology to use. They also acknowledge that data management is costly. We would have to look at personnel, equipment, time, funds to start or even to sustain these data collections efforts. And again, there's also a challenge of data cleaning, harmonization. So it's a whole gamut of challenges in terms of data management. And then for the expectations from government, some of these range from the aspect of looking for policy the aspect of the process of regulation, and then in the end, what are we doing this for? So there was a key message wherein it cross-cutting that there should be some kind of purpose that would be communicated clearly to industry. So some of it would be suggestions for having government give a helping hand approach rather than a regulatory approach, anchored on mutual trust and transparency as part of overall good governance. They would also want very specific asks like an easy platform to use for reporting. They pointed out that within the industry, it is such a heterogeneous industry. There are large operators, large facilities, but there are also small and medium-sized facilities wherein the branch manager is also the PCO, or the pollution control officer. So for those smaller industries, what is the kind of assistance, what is the kind of helping hand that could be provided from government so that they can also easily comply? Another aspect was also pointed out in terms of harmonization and alignment of environmental policy with the policies of NEDA and the regional development councils. Another thing that they said is we hope it won't be too big of a burden to comply, because as I showed in previous slides, there are a lot of things that they have to comply to now and monitor. So as we monitor our environment more, the more things that they have to collect in terms of data and data management and analysis. Okay. And then one last question about increasing the private sector engagement. So how can the private sector engage more actively in greenhouse gas transparency activities? So the answers range from the demand aspect of it, to the incentive aspect of it, to the company having or espousing these advocacies. No? So some of the question or the replies were more of if the market demands it, if there's the push of the market, then we will comply. There's also a challenge for having an easy, useful tool for an easy measurement, reporting, and verification system. One interviewee also voiced the concern of high cost of electricity and utilities in the Philippines, which would be more of their concern rather than greenhouse gas emissions reporting. So there's also that aspect of it having to be run as a business as well. And with that, they also have to look at incentives, and they're looking at linkages to financial subsidies and grants, and a guidance on how to easily adapt low-hanging fruits. Okay. Of course, there's also the desire for private sector's efforts to be appreciated by the market. So if consumers appreciate our efforts, if consumers appreciate that environmental sustainability comes at a price, but it's a good investment for our environment, of course, we would be happy to have increased sector engagement for greenhouse gas transparencies, because in the end, a lot of our companies actually have this as a common goal as part of their advocacy. One thing that we did for the online survey is that we also asked them to sort of rank which factors are a major factor, somewhat a factor, and not a factor. So based on the small group of respondents that we had for our online survey, all of them said that the major factor is if we know what to measure and to report, as well as if we know how to measure and report. So I ranked that as one in the top. No? And a lot of them also said a major factor is if we will benefit from it, if there are gains, if we can also feel it as something that the company benefits from or gains from. And then the other aspect is whether or not they have the personnel, equipment, and the funds to do it. And then even surprisingly, not so much a factor for some is whether or not it's required by government or their mother company. So there's really just a spirit of transparency and volunteering to be part of greenhouse gas emission reporting. It's just that they don't know where to start for a lot of them. Okay. And then let me spend a few minutes to share my insights on what a dashboard probably would look like. I remember a time, perhaps a lot of you also remember a time, wherein your self-monitoring reports had to be submitted on paper. But this was difficult to store, difficult to organize, and essentially there was no processing that was happening with all of the submissions that were done. Or if there was, it takes a long time to process. And then I also remember the time wherein SMRs also had to come with a CD, an optical a drive wherein the report is digitized, something like a power PDF, but digitized doesn't mean digital. Okay, digitized does not necessarily mean that a machine could read the data. And so eventually we transitioned to a digital interface wherein data can easily be read by spreadsheets or computers. And then now, as Mr. J was showing, we are transitioning to having a database. So we have, of course, our National Integrated Climate Change Database Information and Exchange System, or the NICDs. In fact, part of this PaSTI project, we interviewed and had a consultation with our colleagues from the Climate Change Commission. And of course, this NICDs was is institutionalized under Executive Order 174, wherein we have the Philippine Greenhouse Gas Inventory Management and Reporting System. But admittedly, of course, this is, for now, this is what the NICDs looks like as a portal. It is not yet showing live data, of course. We have a lot of work to do before that happens. But the framework is there already, and this is the hope that this will house data clearing and information systems on greenhouse gas. Of course, the DNR website already had a lot of sorry, is it showing? Okay, the DNR website already had a lot of advances on this. Sorry, it's not yet loading, I think. But for those of you who are familiar with it, we have a dashboard wherein hazardous waste generators are shown. And we also have a dashboard where emissions are shown. Okay, here we go. It's loading slowly. Okay, so here is a look of what the DNR EMB website looks like. We have hazardous waste generators data that you could easily access. And in terms of emissions inventory, or for the emissions of concern under the Clean Air Act, we also have that kind of data visualization system. It's also the same for solid waste management as well. Let me just share something that I learned about during my years as an educator about 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. We were part of the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment program, or the GLOBE program. This is a system wherein high school students actually gather data on a regular basis on various aspects of the environment, and they have a reporting system that is global. So this was a project by then Vice President Al Gore. It was initiated in the late 1990s, and it's actually about 25 years in the making already, or running. And if you look at their website, they actually can show you, you can actually look at various aspects of global atmosphere, biosphere, or hydrosphere data collected by high school students. And in fact, some of these data were used by PhD students. So we have that facility to be able to monitor. Even though there is basic data, if we train students young enough, we will be building what we have wanted to have, a data ecosystem. So we have to develop an environment for an ecosystem for environmental data processing. And that entails some kind of rethinking in terms of reporting, not just based on what kind of pollution is to be monitored, but also looking at what kinds of skill sets are needed. We don't just need people who know about pollution. We need people to know about data science and information management. We need people who are comfortable with Excel spreadsheets. We need people who are comfortable and happy and enthusiastic in getting data from the ground. So as a conclusion, may I share something that Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry and stoichiometry, said: "Nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed." So it's back to the basics of balancing equations, masses, looking at the system, looking at basically accounting of our usage and resources and emissions and effluents. So that's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Arigatou gozaimashita. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Miss Melissa. This was a very interesting presentation, no, where we were able to realize the sentiments or the views or insights from our partners from the private industry sector. But anyway, we took note of some important aspects that we as the government should maybe consider or to have it prioritized in our pursuit of transparency and implementation of the MRV system. So at this point, may we have or can we entertain a question or two from the audience? Or do we proceed to the next session? But I suppose Ricky-san had advised us that we could post our questions in the question and answer function. So if there are no more or there are no questions or comments, we shall now proceed with the main focus of this event, which is the public-private sector dialogue, which shall discuss on what should be the key elements or factors that would enable a functional facility-level MRV. And to facilitate this activity, let us again welcome Mr. Ricky Nakajima of OECC. Ricky-san, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Gigi-san. So yes, this is a main event of today's seminar, the public-private sector dialogue. We will invite all the panelists to turn their camera and microphone on. Ms. Gretchen, Engineer Jeffrey, Engineer Cesar, and Engineer Volt. And Mr. J, could you all turn your camera on? So, okay, so first I would like to ask J-san, as a representative of the DNR, to introduce yourself just a little bit to the audience. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Ricky-san. Good morning once again. I'm Rolando Abad Jr. I'm from the Climate Change Service of the DNR. So I'm mainly involved in greenhouse gas inventory, entity level, and also sectoral level, particularly for the waste and IPPU sector. Morning.
Thank you very much. Next, Miss Gretchen, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Ricky. So can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Yes, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Gretchen Inarle, the current president of the Pollution Control Association of the Philippines, or PCAP. Allow me to extend my appreciation on behalf of the association to the organizers, no, the Ministry of Environment of Japan, to the DNR, the OECC, and of course, EnvironWeave for being instrumental, no, to be part of this forum. And our association, please allow me to provide a brief background about PICA-P. So this organization is a non-stock, non-profit, and non-partisan organization. And it is a 42-year-old organization already. We previously envisioned to be the leading organization that complements the government in conserving the Philippine environment. And we represent over 100 companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as large and multinational companies with diverse industry sectors ranging from energy, manufacturing, semiconductors, food and beverages, healthcare facilities, sugar and distillery, transportation. I think we have also members from the construction industry, mining and quarrying, education sector, agriculture, fishery, forestry, waste treatment, among others. So I am happy to be here and to share some of our insights regarding this MRV project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gretchen. And next, I would like to ask Mr. Jeffrey to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody.
Yes, you're
Good
there.
morning, ECC, and all the other panelists and those who are attending this interaction. My name is Jeffrey Miares, the Executive Director of the Samahan ng Philippines Mga Industriang Kimika, or SPIC, the Chemical Industry of the Philippines. In fact, I was also a former president of the Pollution Control Association of the Philippines. And I was involved before, when I was still with the ROAS Holdings Incorporated, in the CDM project for our bioethanol plant, where we supposedly captured the biogas emissions for utilization as fuel for the production of ethanol. And we're happy that we are getting involved in this endeavor. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Jeffrey. And next, I would like to invite Engineer Cesar Luis Lem.
Yeah, I'm Cesar Luis Lim. I'm actually with PaSTI-PH, but I'm also part of the Philippine Green Building Initiative as Board of Trustee. I am also a member of the Decarbonization Task Force of ASRE in the US. So we have a decarbonization task force now in place in ASRE since late last year. So I'm also part of the UN environment, making the manuals for the Kigali Agreement for the how to use the new refrigerants, the HFOs, the natural refrigerants, the A2L, and the hydrocarbon refrigerants for safety. So we're now on the finalization stage on that one, and but until now the Philippines has not signed the Kigali Agreement, so we cannot avail of the Montreal Protocol multilateral fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engineer Cesar. Last but not least, Engineer Voltaire Acosta. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Riki-san. Ohayo gozaimasu. I'm Voltaire Acosta. I'm a chemical engineer and environmental engineer working for a Japan-funded project on promoting 3 Rs to reduce marine plastic pollution. But before that, I used to work with the MSMEs under the DOST's Cleaner Production Technology Center, and also working with various development organizations in proper waste management and pollution prevention aspects, and as an assistant also of the government, an assistant to DNR and CCC in the INDC process, in the MRV process, greenhouse gas inventory also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Boyd. So with today's guiding question, the first one, I would like to start this panel discussion. First guiding question is, what factor or elements would enable a functional facility MRV? We had great presentation from Mr. J before. Mr. J, as point of view from the government, what do you think is the functional, what elements is the functional MRV needed?
Yes, thank you, Ricky-san. I think for an MRV system to be functional, so there would be a close or good relationship between the government as well as the key stakeholders. For example, the private sector. So I think supported by legal agreement, like a memorandum of understanding of cooperation. This would really facilitate the sustainable transfer or provision of data in order for the government to get or collect or consolidate the needed data for example, greenhouse gas inventory, for monitoring or MRV of mitigation actions. So this is very important. And one also factor, and we are also looking at having a web-based platform for this. So right now, still not yet established, but this is part of our goal for enhancing our MRV system, so that we will be able to develop a web-based or online reporting and data collection system. So we will also be integrating these data requirements into the existing reporting system. So I think this is very important for us, the cooperation, the partnership with the key stakeholders, as well establishing the platform for bridging this data collection. Thank you very much, Ricky.
Thank you very much, Jason. So yes, today we have actually very interesting private sector key stakeholders. We usually focus on the cement sectors with the previous seminars, but today we have representative from different sectors. First, I would like to ask Ms. Gretchen from the PaSTI-PH, who has experience of MRV, not GHG related, but MRV as pollution control officers. So could you please tell us what would make the functional, what do you think would enable a functional MRV system?
Thank you, Ricky. Okay, from the point of view of PKP, I think first we want to extend our congratulations at this early to the DNR for coming up with this endeavor. So for me, for a functional MRV, I think I would like to highlight what has been discussed earlier, the shared responsibility and the transparency. Okay, with regards to the shared responsibility, it's between the support of the government as well as so that the industry sectors or the stakeholders can provide accurate information to that one. And with that, there must be a clear objective or guidelines in the implementation of the MRV that is understood by all stakeholders. I mean, the metrics that was shared earlier, it was more likely intended for large and multinational companies maybe, but I think the more inclusive ones we have in the association, we have small and medium-sized enterprises. So those must be covered also if you want to have an inclusive data collection. And then, of course, the second one is the availability of appropriate or standardized tools and methodologies in the collection and the reporting system. As have been discussed earlier, the companies are willing to share some of this information, but I think we must establish first the tools, no? Tell us how to do it and maybe answer the what, the when, the where, and the how, and to whom do we submit those information? Because we also understand that there are some confidential business informations in relation to the business operation. So we must also have some inclusion within our policies regarding those provisions. And maybe the capacity building, no? We appreciate the series of capacity building that have been conducted already, but we can expand our network and go through the specific industry sectors that you want to target. You have targeted the cement, the waste, but for the chemical sector, there are a lot of chemicals or industry sectors still that may not be covered by the metrics. But again, I understand from Mr. Abad's presentation, there might be in the future inclusion of those industries that may not be covered by the initial draft. So I think that one, support from the government as to how, who, what are the criteria, what are the parameters to be monitored, and when to monitor, where do we submit the information, and of course, the how, the methodologies. So I think that would be a good component or element of a functional MRV.
Thank you very much for your comment. Yes, absolutely. A clear guidance is very important to have those big mass to move and make them to report something. Next one, I would like to ask Sir Jeffrey for your opinion about the efficient MRV system.
Yes. In 2015, there was this low emission capacity building project for the Philippines in cooperation with UNDP, the Australian government, and the European Union. And they introduced this greenhouse gas reporting protocol, a management plan, which is needed. And I would like to point out the 5 different reporting protocols of this management plan. By participating in the project and preparing GHG emissions inventory data, partners go beyond the usual corporate social responsibility aspect of their operations. So that's one. There has to be a change in mindset. Partners will be able to manage their GHG risk and identify reduction opportunities, or we call it the LED, because that is a part of the low carbon development, or LCD. Obtain public support by reporting and participating in GHG programs, participating in GHG markets, and be recognized by government and other institutions for the best practices in climate change activities. And third, partners would also strategically position themselves for any climate change policy that the government may pursue, not only in fulfillment of the country's commitments to the UNFCCC, but also for economic growth and development. The fourth, develop the GHG inventory protocol and management plan manual. That's what we need. Establish reporting platform through the NICDIES, which is the National Integrated Climate Change Database and Information Exchange System. We establish all of these important aspects of before we start with the MRV. Then it will be easy for us, for the industries to participate in this program, because there was in fact a survey which says during that time 87% believe that climate change regulations present risks to their organization, as what has been mentioned during that presentation. However, 51% also believe lack of regulation is also a risk. So with that, there's other aspects also of this GHG inventory reporting protocol and management plan. There are still others, but I'll start with I'll just mention about the 5 parts of the LEDs, and developing a low carbon part of the low carbon development of the government. So we should realize that the private sector is just waiting to be given the tools to implement this program as a part of the transparency, and also to cooperate with the governments in attaining its targets. Because most of the companies do not have actually started, they have no programs with the GHG verification, reporting, inventory, and management plan. So through capacity building, we can in fact develop this, change the mindset of many of the companies, because we always ask what is in it, for us. Even though the Philippines is always a victim of the brunt of climate change, with the typhoons that have been hitting us, and they are really very powerful. Not in our lifetime, we never expected this to happen. Every time we are hit by these powerful, we call them now super typhoons. So because we don't have to be, we will not take this for granted, even if in the overall, in the world emissions of greenhouse gases, our emissions is only less than 1%. I think it's only 0.3%. So meaning, why should we care if the others do not do anything about it? The big emitters do not do about it. But then when we are hit by the packet, like for example, our customers, chemical product customers, importers of our chemical products in EU and many other countries, if they have a policy that you have to report your low carbon development mechanisms and show proof that you have done something to reduce your emissions in the product manufacture and development. So that is something when the economic part of this, in spite of no regulations given by the government, but then when your customers demand such, just like when the greening the supply chain, which is required by our big major customers in practicing good management practices. And we are forced to do it, whether we like it or not, because it's the market that really drives this initiative. Right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, thank you very much for your insight of the economic aspect, that not only the requirement from the US FCC shall be considered, but also how to develop under these circumstances the national economy. So next, I would like to ask Engineer Cesar for his floor. You have also not only the experience as the GHG emission, but also in the refrigeration sector with handling the different gas. So what do you think it makes? What do you think is the elements of the efficient MRV system?
Well, it would be a good one if you have an efficient MRV system. But generally, I'm still skeptic because most of those commercial air conditioning and refrigeration system are still using high GWP gases. It would only take effect when we started our freeze by January 2024 for the freeze based on the Kigali Agreement and the start of using new low GWP refrigerants. A lot of problems that we have is basically on implementation. Hopefully the MRV will be implemented well and successfully. But if not, we'll have another problem just like what happened long before during the start of the Montreal Protocol, during the phase out of the CFC, then the HCFC. And also there are problems on how to get those data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Cesar. So, Engineer Volt, I read in your short bio that you were involved in the GHG inventory for the municipal solid and wastewater before in a project. Could you tell us from that experience what will make an efficient MRV system?
Okay. Thank you very much, Ricky-san. Previous support in partnership with the government was on the sectoral level and national level greenhouse gas inventory systems. And yes, just like any other sectors, there is really a process for consolidating all the data. For example, for the solid waste management, we have to get data from the local government units through the EMB regional offices, consolidate it at the national level, and then, of course, process it and convert it to CO2 equivalents. So we rely heavily on the existing systems and standards that are already existing, at least for the sectoral level monitoring. And actually, along the way, during the process of doing greenhouse gas inventories, we found it really, it has an added value to enhance the sectoral itself, not the climate lens, but the sectoral in improving data collection and management. For the wastewater sector, yes, I think Sergey already mentioned that there are also data requirements that would have to be gathered from the private sector, like from the water districts, from sewage treatment facilities, and yes, it entails also many institutional arrangements, data consolidation arrangements, and all. But just to add to the MRV elements that would be needed, I think we are also discussing not just the greenhouse gas MRV of greenhouse gas inventory, but also the MRV of mitigation actions, and also the MRV of support, as what Sir Albert also mentioned a while ago. And it requires really a national impetus, for the system. Of course, develop the system first and the guidelines before there's really a directive on how to do it. Very specific, elaborated details. And yeah, I like that there are already sheets that are enhancing the way, okay, if I were the private sector, what data do I need to provide? But on the aspect of facility level inventory and the reporting of mitigation actions is related to, but sometimes the scope are different from the sectoral and national greenhouse gas inventory. So the challenge there is also the interconnectivity or the harmonization of the data requirements. How could the facility level greenhouse gas inventories and facility level reporting of reduction in emissions, can it be consolidated to the national level or sectoral level? And that's also the challenge. And it should be in line also with what the data requirements, corporate reporting and all. So it's it would be nice because it would make it would make easier for companies to really comply, because if the data are all harmonized, what the national level, especially in line with the NDCs and the greenhouse gas inventory reporting platform calls for, and the corporate social responsibility, sustainability reporting, KPIs, marketing and sales, if it really, and in communicating carbon. So lastly, there's also the element of, I always hear from our co-panelists a while ago about what's in it for me. What would be my impetus? What would be my incentives for me to do this? So it's also nice if we can demonstrate that doing inventory, baselining, of course, at the same time, making the reduction in emissions, does it make sense for the company to do so? So in this case, it might help also if there are socioeconomic impact assessments and co-benefit analysis of doing greenhouse gas emissions reduction and how it really supports corporate goals also. I hope I answered your question, Ricky-san.
Yes, thank you very much for your comment. So yes, this was also my question to Jay-san. So you said there is not enough data for compiling the inventory, but what is the benefit of having complete data sets for the inventory? What kind of action can you take if the data is full? Can you explain us that part, please?
Yes, thank you, Ricky-san. I think it's very important in doing greenhouse gas inventory, it's part of the principles in greenhouse gas accounting, the TRACCC, transparency, relevance, accuracy, completeness, comparability. So these principles should be considered in doing greenhouse gas inventory, because later on, and like what we do in the NDC, these greenhouse gas inventories is being used as the baseline for comparing emissions or emissions reductions, and it's also being projected using data and assumptions. So if you don't have an accurate or relatively precise inventory, then it would not make sense in comparing or tracking the results of your mitigation actions. So it's like the GIGO model, the garbage in, garbage out. So whether you input an accurate and complete data, then you will have a very good result. But if you don't have a good data, then it's not very good basis for projecting your mitigation actions, your NDC, and any other mitigation measures. So I think it's very critical for us, if not the highest level of accuracy, but somehow we can improve our greenhouse gas inventory that would be relevant in also MRV of the mitigation actions. Thank you, Ricky-san.
And thank you, Jason, for your comments. So I guess to have a complete data set, it also can be accounted. It is important to account every private sector's effort for their mitigation actions. So to have data sets so that those efforts can be really valued. Regarding the incentives, I think Mr. Jeffrey, you had some ideas regarding low-hanging fruit. Can you tell us about the low-hanging fruit of why people should do the MRV, voluntary action of MRV?
Yes, Ricky-san. What is important really is the emission factor, where you can relate for any change in processes or even equipment. There's a direct, it is directly proportional to the reduction in emission. So that can be shown if you can show that to management, that if you are going to replace all of this equipment with this type, we are going to reduce this much, because it is directly proportional to the emission factor that should be the standard. Like for example, an LED light bulb, which is 10 watts. How much is the reduction? So by factoring, you use that directly. That would be very easy, because otherwise you are going to assign somebody who is very good at it in taking the inventory and using the factors, quite good in mathematics. So you need that person, and that is a very tedious job to do. But if it is very easy, because we can in fact find that from the UNFCCC website, all of these factors, and there have been a lot of fora that showed that there's direct proportionality of a certain equipment if you replace it with a green equipment. There's a direct proportionality in the reduction of greenhouse emissions. So if we can have that matrix, very simple, in maybe Excel format that has already a formula. Every time you just put in the data, it will automatically give you the equivalency of the tons CO2 emission reduction. So if the management can see that, they will be convinced. Those are the hanging fruits that I have mentioned about. Can be convinced that it is really the way to go, because it is not only economically feasible, but beneficial as well. Maybe you cannot immediately feel it, but eventually you will see that your power consumption has gone down. Your water consumption. I met before somebody who wants to put up they want to comply with the DNR employment standards when domestic waste was included. That have to be monitored and reported, and they are now part of the regulations. So I told them there are a lot of in the market that can reduce your. There you start there from the very beginning, from the source. Like for example, replacing all your faucets with automatic closing or remote control, and then the water closets themselves. They are the reduced rate of flushing. So that alone is also a great reduction because there is also a direct proportionality in the amount of BOD that is being removed with the emission or carbon dioxide during the treatment process. So that's very easy to do if we have the what you call this the factor, emission factor.
Yes.
And you don't really need someone who is very good at it because every time you just puts in the figure, automatically it translates to an emission reduction. So that's what I am trying to point out. Make things easier. It should be user friendly, and people would enjoy doing it rather than they are compelled to do it.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, for my personal impression of GHG inventory is actually myself standing every morning on the scale, knowing how much body weight I'm weighing and how much exercise I need. So I think this kind of exercise is fun to watch by myself. If I know every day after running maybe for half an hour and sitting on my scale and see my weight just a little bit lowering. So I think things like that is also aspect of the GHG inventory. And as you mentioned, with fun or with visualizing the benefit of the GHG inventory, I think those can be very good incentive mechanism. Thank you very much, Mr. Engineer Jeffrey. So regarding the tools and guidelines needed, I would like to ask Ms. Gretchen, as your experience as the PCO, what kind of tools and guidelines is very important if the government want to introduce new requirements to the PCO officers?
Yeah, thank you again, Ricky-san, for that question. I think when we had the discussion or the survey with Ms. Mel, we have expressed our interest in having a standardized tools or some Excel format, which Mr. Abad already shared to us, that can be used not only by the large or multinational companies, but also the small and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, let's go down to the level of the small and medium-sized enterprises because I think they have limited resources. We know for a fact that there are a lot of tools, no, from different websites. You have US EPA, you have from the UN, but tell us what is more appropriate to the local setting. Like for example, we have no knowledge about those information. Please cascade to us, like for example, expand your network in disseminating the information for that basic tool. No, if you can go down to the industry level, like we have the Chemical Industries Association of the Philippines here. They have affiliate associations. In our organization, PICAP, there are also affiliate organizations. So we can cascade down the metrics that you have shown that can be understood by the stakeholders without even explaining further, no, too much explanation, and then we can only encode what are the appropriate or the necessary data or the information. That would be it. I mean, we have considered the larger sector, cement sector, waste sector. But I think if you group the small and medium-sized enterprises, that could have also a contribution to our GHG inventory. And then another important thing which I forgot to mention earlier is the consolidation of the reporting mechanism. I mean, if you are, you mentioned there are 4 government agencies, the DENR, the DA, the DOTR, and the Department of Energy. Last year, there was a communication or a memorandum circular cascaded by or issued by the Department of Energy, requiring all companies with this quantity of electrical consumption to report on that. Now, consolidation meaning there should be no duplication of information. I mean, if the DOE requires us to report the energy sector or the energy consumption, then other government agencies should not be requiring us to report the same information, because there is duplication of data. The data that we are gathering is not accurate. So there could be less or more of the electrical consumption. And this also maximizes the efforts, no, of the pollution control officers, the PCOs, of their resources, their time, their energy in complying so many government regulations. I mean, there must be a consolidation. And maybe at the end of the day, when we gather the information must be utilized to develop some mechanism to provide incentives for the stakeholders, not to compel them again to comply to another regulation, something like that. So another information that could be incorporated in the policies or guidelines for a more effective MRV project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gretchen. Yes, thank you for highlighting actually the SMEs. To broaden the reporting effort, I think those stakeholders cannot be forgotten. They are very, very important for the reporting effort and increasing the data quality. Actually, in Japan, the MOEJ, Ministry of Environment Japan, they have some support for the SMEs. So in future, we may be able to introduce some of the Japanese efforts or policy efforts in Philippines also as one of the PaSTI cooperation. Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Mr. Vold regarding what was my question again? I'm sorry. About yes, where was it? Sorry, but anyway, about the about your experience in the INDC crafting of the INDC. There was, I think, from INDC, the government of Philippines has updated to current NDC to optimally measure the effort or tracking the NDC. What kind of guidelines from the government is needed?
Yes. Thank you, Ricky-san. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, yes. The NDC is actually very interesting because so far we have very robust greenhouse gas inventory MRV system so far. But yeah, in anticipation of the tracking and reporting and transparency framework for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, that is actually one thing that needs to be crafted well and all interconnected, as what Ms. Gretchen says, we want to make the system to be interconnected to each other, and not manually isolate and extract data to be used for this purpose and another purpose. So there are two things that I might want to highlight. Number one of the discussions was that about the tracking of mitigation actions, the MRV of mitigation actions. Because although in general, the measurement of the avoidance reduction or sequestration of greenhouse gases against the baseline or the greenhouse gas inventory is almost always compatible, but not always the case. There are some cases when when the reduction in emissions happens in another sector, which is actually against the baseline of another sector. There's also the difference between the facility, and that also has implications on the possible double counting. For example, I understand it very much because the entity level greenhouse gas reporting actually covers all possible sectors that the facility emits. Now, how could the reduction in one particular sector from that greenhouse gas facility level greenhouse emissions reduction MRV be reported? Normally, we report it at the sectoral level, but the facility level inventory covers all possible sectors. How could that be extracted without actually double counting? So the system and the guidelines and the tools for that to avoid double counting, and also, of course, report properly, and of course, as a basis for possible incentives in the future, could be mainstreamed properly. Yeah, so that's just the tools, because this is something new. For example, I just want to emphasize the example of a green building. A green building reports emissions reduction in the energy sector, if they have waste reduction initiatives, if they have wastewater treatment. So those have all to be interconnected to the sectoral level reporting as well. So it contributes to the NDC transparency framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Vogt. Engineer Cesar, so I think consolidating the reporting effort is one of the very important part in your sector of the RAC, because there are so many things you might have to report in near future, not only GHG, but HFCs or some other gases. What do you think is, so please highlight us again the importance of consolidating those reporting efforts.
Well, the problem with reporting is compliance to the report. If you look at buildings, most of the buildings right now are using HFCs. And there's no more CFCs, and HFCs had been phased out already, so no new HFC chillers or equipment are being sold. But the problem is still there. For example, in window air cons and some of the chillers, you still have R22. But after 2024, there will be another type of reporting because of the phase down of the HFCs. So, and the problem is compliance. So how can DNR or Climate Change Commission implement it? That's our biggest problem right now. It's easy to say that it would be done, but knowing Filipinos, they would not do it faithfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cesar. So one of the mentioned points regarding the consolidating the efforts of report and not double counting or not duplicating their work. Jason, do you have any communication between the CCC and your department or with other departments to avoid those duplications?
Yes, yes, Rika-san. Actually, we have established an interagency technical working group for greenhouse gas inventory. So we call this the EO174 agencies, in which the Climate Change Commission is the coordinating entity, and we are just the sectoral leads for each agency. So we meet from time to time, and also we have different TWG for the NDC, but most of the members of the GHG is also a member of the NDC TWG. So there's a constant meeting if called by the Climate Change Commission. So we also discuss cross-sectoral concerns or issues. So we actually don't duplicate in terms of the sectoral inventory. We're not duplicating efforts of the DOE, for example. They're more focused on the energy emissions from the electricity, from the fuel. But for the IPPU sector, we're more focused on the process emissions and the product use. So I think there's no duplication among the data needs right now. No, but I think there's also the room for improvement in terms of the harmonization of the existing reports being generated by the different agencies. So there's a potential that some of the data that we need are already part of the existing report consolidated by other agencies. So we're looking at right now improvement in terms of reporting system, the existing reporting system. Yes, Ricky-san.
Thank you very much, Jason. Yes, and actually myself and Miss Melissa, who presented previously the result of the key stakeholder engagement, are actually doing currently the desk studies of already existing MRV and how we could utilize those MRVs. So thank you very much for those comments. So I think we had very good discussion on the first part of the questions. There were already some mentioning of the actual difficulties on data collection. I think I will go back to Jason again regarding from DENR side. Is there any difficulties currently? What is most barrier for you regarding the data collection?
Yes, thank you for that. As what I think Mr. Lim has pointed out, we have challenge in collecting data from the industries, from the private sector. Some data, especially if we look at improving our inventory, looking at tier 2 inventory where we need more data than tier 1. So there's like for example for the refrigeration and air conditioning sector, we encountered a lot of constraints and concerns in terms of data confidentiality. This data is not for sharing. For some companies, like in the glass company, some company are hesitant to share with us data that is needed or other than the data that is required in the SMR. So if this data are not required in the SMR, they're very hesitant to provide us this data. And they're always asking us for the legal basis. So I think with the EO Executive Order 174, this is one of the legal bases that we are really looking at in order to get this data. So we hope that in the future, such concerns could be addressed by venturing into confidentiality agreement or memorandum of understanding, just to ensure that this data that they're providing to us is secured and it would not be used for other purposes other than the greenhouse gas inventory or the NDC monitoring. Thank you, Ricky-san.
Thank you, Jason, for your comments. Yes, so yeah, as many people have already also during the private sector dialogue mentioned the legal basis, I think it's also for both submitting the data, but also for the receiving data, a big barrier right now. Miss Gretchen, may I ask, I mean, you already have mentioned several difficulties as PCO for for complying all those laws, new laws. As a field officer, what is the most difficult part if now suddenly there is a law that says you need to report GHG if yes, that's my first question, sorry. And I think you mentioned already, if there are tools and clear guideline, it might be easier to follow. But is it really that easy, or do you think there are more challenges, for example, personnel-wise? Could you highlight those challenges, what PCO may face if they suddenly need to report another aspects?
Okay, I think in the current situation, why we have difficulty in collecting data through this GHG inventory. First one, I have already expressed this one, is the clear policy guidelines from our regulatory agencies. That's one, because at the moment, if the company is really complying with the existing regulations, as mentioned by Ms. Mel earlier, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, the solid waste management or your hazardous waste, the business is okay. I think because they are complying with the regulations. And that's one. I think if it is mandated by regulation, or if there is a push for us to report on specific requirements, what are the criteria or the parameter to be included in our reports, there's no problem on that. Like, for example, the self-monitoring report. Companies are required to report on their electrical consumption, water consumption, the generation of their hazardous waste, their wastewater treatment facility if they have, and then of course the volume of production. So there's no problem with that, because that is those information were already required in the preset self-monitoring report. And I would think that this could be also applicable maybe in the future with regards to the GHG inventory. If you want us to monitor carbon dioxide emission, provide us the tools. But as of now, there is no available tool for us to encode all the information to generate readily the carbon dioxide equivalent or the reduction of GHG emissions. And then I have also expressed the confidentiality, as mentioned also by Mr. Abad here, the confidentiality of the information. Some of our member companies also expressed that they are limited from sharing those information, because at times some of our regulators get back to them, and then there will be some discussions with the company, something like that. And then maybe in our experiences, if we share information, the next move will be upcoming regulation, additional clearances, additional permits. So those are some of the barriers. Those are some of the barriers and challenges that really the companies are experiencing. And then the hardest hit would be the small and medium-sized enterprises, as I have mentioned. Because additional permits or license would also equate sometimes into costs in complying all those regulations.
Yes, yes. To building capacity for those PC officers is also cost that I perfectly understand. And also, yes, about the confidentiality, that's a very, very big hurdle, maybe to solve in near future. I believe that there is is there anyone who has experience the sustainability report of SEC? They have some kind of GHG report emissions to report. I think it's only for the big companies, but do you know how those is? Does anyone have experience with it? This is just my question. So if nobody can answer, then that's fine. Anyway, then to go with the to Mr. Volt, because I don't see Sir Caesar.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're there. Either one of you. What do you think is the barrier of the collecting data besides technology? For example, in Sir Cesar's sector, you mentioned there are still not enough technology to measure HCF emissions or in your sector. Besides technology, what do you think is the challenges for in data collection in your sector?
Well, it is the what you call the people in the private sector who they are not doing it because they lack manpower also to do that. So that would be an added expense for them.
Yes, lack manpower. Yes.
Mm.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Boyd, how about your opinion?
Yes, thank you, Riku-san. So far, I was supposed to say data sharing arrangements is really important, but that has already been mentioned a while ago. But I just would want to emphasize also data consolidation arrangements, because one, against greenhouse gas inventory and mitigation actions, there's also a difference between top-down assessments and bottom-up reporting of the reduction actions. Plus, number two, the malmitigation safeguards. That is also a barrier in general, because for example, there are analyses where, for example, you would want to control the charcoal making from mangrove areas, and you don't want it to be used for cooking purposes by the households. However, there should be an analysis on the shift. If I were banned to use charcoal for my household cooking purposes, where would I resort to? It is more on the LPG or electric stoves, right? So it might happen that there's also a reduction happening in one sector, but actually there's a malmitigation happening elsewhere, and that has to be completely less. But yeah, I also have friends who also consult me about, because they're also PCOs and they're also reporting greenhouse gas emissions. What they're always asking is keep it simple and sweet as much as possible. If we are able to mainstream data sets that they can use for multiple purpose, one-time gathering, but for multiple purpose, for SEC reporting, for sustainability reporting, and for government reporting, that would be nice. That's what and also self-filling out, that was mentioned already a while ago. If the forms, the survey forms, the data forms are already easy enough that I don't need to be coached on how to use it, it's really perfectly understandable for me, that would be nice. And lastly, probably another barrier is making sense of this all. Why are we doing this? And MRV is actually just a tool to support something, a goal, a national goal or a corporate goal. But probably one thing that could also be circumvented is that even without regulations, what could make facilities companies to report, be proud of what they're doing, and of course report baseline emissions and be proud of what they're doing in emissions reduction. So one, of course, the typical justification is that NDC is not just a government effort. NDC is multiple efforts, including the private sector's effort, but also the challenge is communicating carbon, not just to regulators, but the decision makers, management, and their consumers. It's always difficult. People would always ask me, how do you communicate carbon? Why does it make sense for us to communicate carbon? We could have communicated energy reduction. We could have communicated wastewater reduction or BOD reduction. But why? How do we communicate carbon? So those are the barriers, I think, that could even without regulations, of course, institutional structures and regulations and directives and guidelines would really be of big help. But I'm thinking, what would be the low-hanging fruits without the regulations? How can we make this high on the agenda that it really makes sense for the companies?
Thank you very much, Sabol. So actually, we have had this panel discussion already over an hour. Wow. If there are any questions from the floor, I would like to happily ask the panelists. So please use the Q&A function if there are questions to the panelists, or also to the presentation before from Ms. Melissa or from Jason. If people are writing the questions right now, I would like to maybe start to the closing of this panel discussion by asking everyone last words regarding your point of view of the from Jason, what you want to ask to the private sector regarding the effort for the MRV, and from the private sector, your request to the public. So who want to start?
Yeah, I can
Jason, your
start.
microphone. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I can start, Ricky-san. Yeah, actually, we don't have much experience really on greenhouse gas inventory, and this is the first time that the government is taking the lead on greenhouse gas inventory, national greenhouse gas inventory. So as you can see, the executive order has been issued in 2014, so it's almost 8 years now, but we just have a sample calculation exercise in 2018, developing the 2010 inventory. So this is actually the first time, the 2015 and the 2020 green inventory year, that we are really looking at doing this to be submitted as part of the national communication and as part of the biennial update report of the Philippines. So in order to be successful, for the government to be successful in developing this, we really need the help of the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, the data providers, the private sector, the LGUs, the academe, and everyone else to make this process a very meaningful one, because it's also very important, not just for the government, but also for the industry to be able to track down our emissions, identify mitigation measures. And under the NDC, we are also entitled to get support from developed countries in order to transition into a climate smart industries, low carbon industry. So this is really the path that we have to take right now, considering the problem that we have in climate change, and the requirement to be carbon neutral by 2050. So many companies, if you're familiar with many multilateral companies, they're already targeting carbon neutrality because this is the way to go. Because if we don't do this, climate change impacts will get worse. So thank you, Ricky-san.
Thank you, Jason. Next, who want to take floor? Ms. Gretchen, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky-san. Again, I would like to extend our thank yous or appreciation to the whole organizers of this forum. It was very enlightening for me also to learn, especially from the insights of the UN Habitat. Sir Voltaire, thank you very much. And to all the panelists, thank you very much. Sir Jay, your presentation was excellent. That was what we are looking for, the appropriate or standardized tools for us to use in order to report all the requirements or the data information you are requiring from us stakeholders. Our expectations from the government, of course, to support, to provide support continuously, especially in the capacity building, and in so many other associated activities with regards to this inventory taking of the GHA. As you may know, PCAP was established to help really the PCO comply with the regulatory requirements, as well as help the government in promoting and protecting the environment. So that was our vision, and it's still our vision today. So we have a whole line of industries, no, that may be covered by your inventory taking. Again, we have 15 industry sectors, over 101 companies who can be part of the baseline, no, in gathering the baseline information. But at least you have to provide us the specific tools, and then later on maybe the incentives, the incentives for the industry. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gretchen. And Sir Jeffrey, may I ask for your last words?
The chemical industry is guided by our global initiative, which is responsible care, the voluntary initiative developed autonomously by our industry for so with following the 7 codes, environmental protection, safety and security, and other elements of responsible care. So we are in that forefront of that because we have to be compliant. One of the most regulated industries in our country is the chemical industry, and Gretchen knows about that when she was still the president. So I think for as long as it does not really cost much for the company, and the information that we'll provide, they do not have to invoke the Data Privacy Act, because there is an executive order with regards to GHG emission measurements reporting. So there has to be something that we can say that it is beneficial. And as mentioned earlier, the tools to make it better. There has to be something easy, something user friendly, and you do not need really your best guy to do it, because otherwise, when he leaves, you are left in alerts, and that is very difficult, because we should understand that the movement of pollution control officers is quite fast. They do not stay long. They leave the companies. I have experienced that. I have a company, and I have already 3 pollution control officers in only a span of 1 year. They do not stay long. After training them, they leave for something better. So that's also one of the problems that the industry has. The point person who can do these things do not stay long in one company. And when you are very good, you are given more responsibilities, and so you need another person that you can appoint or designate as a pollution control officer to take the job. And it takes a little while before they get the hang of it. So I have seen that the SMR alone, which is done every quarter, there are still lapses. Many companies, especially the small and medium industries, cannot comply, or if they do, they are late. So you can just imagine if you will add the MRV in one of the responsibilities, it will be a burden to them. But make it simple and easy for them to do, and I think there will be not much of a problem if that is added to the SMR by virtue of a regulatory requirement. But it has to be only one source of that regulation, not multiple sources. Like energy inventory, energy reporting is required by the DOE, like consumption of fuel, etc. While with regards to environmental influence and emissions, it is the DNR AMD. So the danger of duplication is always there. There are too many things to do, and that is a burden for many of the small and medium industries. But we are welcome to this MRV as a initially as a private initiative, and then eventually it may be a regulatory requirement. And I think that is the way to go as far as I am concerned.
Thank you very much. So now, Cesar, do you, for your last words, please.
Yeah, actually, I agree with Jeffrey's suggestion that it be a regulatory requirement, because without regulatory requirement, the private sector will not do it. I'm sure of that. I know them. Those businessmen are only for profit, nothing else. They even buy smuggled CFC or HCFC or HFC afterwards, as long as the cost is low. That's how our businessmen are in the Philippines. So they don't care of the environment. What they care is for their pockets. That's all.
Thank you very much, Sir Cesar. So last but not least, Sir Vold, could you please have your last words?
Yes, thank you very much. And I learned a lot also from our co-panelists. I missed also being with the industry. But yeah, just want to emphasize simplify everything. Sir Jeffrey mentioned, and Ma'am Gretchen also hinted, if you're good, you're given more responsibilities, and we don't want to be additional burden. We want it to make sense for them. So simplify. And the starting point for that is do not reinvent the wheel. There are existing structures where we can work on and streamline, even not add additional ones, but we can streamline and mainstream it somewhere in the institution, and that makes our work more efficient. Everybody's happy, and even the data, the ones that need the data and reporting need it. But just like last word would be just like this one, which is also the project that I'm handling, which is also Japan funded project, working with OECC now, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to see dialogues like this. Always. There's always disconnect sometimes between what we perceive from different lenses and from different stakeholders and different sectors, but I'm happy with such dialogue. So congratulations, DNR also, and OECC and supporters. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me highlight those what we have discussed today. So regarding the challenges of data collection, I think one of the most important part was the legal basis. So legal basis of asking DNR to submit private sector data, and also how to deal with those confidential information. Other thing is what Ms. Gretchen mentioned, the SMEs regarding that additional cost. Those must be also very, it's a big barrier. And also simply there might still no technology for collecting data. So those barriers need to be solved or through capacity building. I think what those also can be supported by the PaSTI for future. Regarding the what factors of elements would enable a functional facility MRV, I think we had very interesting discussion, and I highlighted 3 points. Again, it's the one very important fact is the importance of clear guidance and easily applicable tools, so that everybody can use a standard format to report. I think those will definitely need to be developed. And other thing is, yes, it's a business. So incentives. What can we provide those people who are actively involved in the transparency action? So incentive mechanism is also very important to show the clear benefits. Other part is, again, it comes from the cost of the reporting, but no duplication. So every organization, even government side, need to be coordinated so that and harmonization is very, very important. So with this, I would like to thank every panelist for this very, very interesting discussions and close this panel discussion. Gigi-san, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Riki-san. That was a very interesting dialogue or discussion among our partners from the private sector or the industry sector. So before we conclude this event, we deem it appropriate and beneficial for us to be oriented on the pilot project, which we have mentioned earlier, or which was the topic of our second session earlier. So to present an overview of what we envision to be the pilot project, may I please call again on Riki-san to enlighten us on this pilot project. Thank you.
Yes, Gigi-san, thank you very much. Miss Mel, can you share the screen?
Yes, Riki-san, just a moment. It's still loading. But yes, I'll catch up. Go ahead.
Okay, so again, thank you very much for joining today's PaSTI public-private sector dialogue. I hope we were able to entertain you with very interesting informations and discussions. So as it was mentioned before, the PaSTI project are ambitioning to design a pilot project to design a pilot project. And I would like to go briefly over the outline of that pilot project. Mel-san, if it's difficult to share from your side, I can share from my side. Let me check where I have. Yes. So I hope everybody can see my screen. So the purpose of this pilot project is to facilitate the conduction of bottom-up transparency activities with the involvement of the private sector, and produce robust GHG accounting and consistent. And we are trying to make this pilot project to produce robust GHG accounting and consistent with key international standards, and hope that pilot project is also be very flexible to sector-specific needs and national circumstances. And with this pilot project, we are envisioning to provide practical suggestions for policymakers and GHG reporting entities, including maybe some potential incentives. The outline of the project is estimated activity period will be summer 2022. Things we still need to discuss though are the methodologies and how to report. In the methodologies that include which sector we target, what kind of scope we are talking about, and how to account the GHG emissions. Also, we are trying to develop useful tools which were mentioned during the panel discussions, such as uniform reporting format, and provide capacity building as part of the online workshops. This part of methodologies and reporting process, we will use the conclusions and suggestions of today's panel discussions and ideas obtained from the key informant interviews and desk top studies that we are currently conducting. So hopefully next fiscal year, next Japanese fiscal year starting April, we can again continue those discussions and interviews to support us to design this pilot project. So this was a quick overview and outline about the pilot project. Gigi-san, I would like to give the microphone back to you.
Thank you very much, Ricky-san. So this brings us to the conclusion of our event for this dialogue. And as we formally close this event, may we respectfully request Ms. Hiroka Watarai, a researcher from the OECC. Oh, it's already Mr. Jiro Ogahara, also of the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, to deliver us his closing message. Sir Jiro-san, please take the floor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we do, loud and clear.
Okay, I think the camera is not. Melsan, can you enable the camera?
I'm not. Ricky-san, perhaps as a host, you can. I'm not able to enable your.
Yes, I am enabling his camera right now. Can you be the co-host, Jiro-san?
Okay, give me a second, please.
Yes, now I think you are.
Okay. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. This is Jiro Ogahara. I am senior researcher at OECC, and I'm also part of the Philippines team. So please allow me to give a few words as closing remarks for today's event. As explained at the beginning by my colleague, Mr. Nakajima, today's event completes a series of activities that the PaSTI team has drafted in coordination with the counterpart, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources of the Philippines, DENR. Since 2019, the PaSTI team has been challenged to find creative ways to promote the participation of the private sector in developing the MRV system for NDC mitigation measures in the waste and IPPU sectors, in line with the transparency goals set by the Paris Agreement. I hope you can agree with me that we are going in the right direction. First of all, we're getting more attention and involvement from the private sector, and the considerable number of participants in our events demonstrates that the goal of conducting capacity building activities has been accomplished. In addition, we have drafted sector-specific guidelines as part of incentive mechanisms to engage the private sector. And currently, we are looking forward to the activities that we are planning for the second half of this year, namely the pilot project that already Ricky explained. I believe the results and opinions that we have gathered today will allow us to close this phase successfully. So let me finish by my remarks by thanking you all for your valuable contribution. First of all, I would like to thank to the speakers and panelists of today's dialogue for their interesting insights. And moreover, I would like to thank the efforts made by our partners, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources of the Philippines, for co-organizing this event that closes the first Philippines-Japan's Environmental Week. I sincerely hope that it is just the first of many events to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jiro-san. So on behalf also of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we would like to thank you all, especially our partners from the private and industry sector in the Philippines, for having participated in this event. And we also would like to express our gratitude to the government of Japan through the support that has always been extended to us, especially through the Ministry of Environment Japan and the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, OECC, also of Japan. So we certainly have a long way to go, or long way ahead. And with our continued partnership and collaboration, we can reach our goals for a climate resilient and sustainable development. So thank you very much and maraming salamat po. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you,
And
Paul.
good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Oh, it's already afternoon here.
Yes, it is.